Men rising up to end the silence around us about the chains that bind us, to dispel the darkness of illusion with luminous spiritual technologies, to finally become the hero within us all. This is Arise, the Honest Man's podcast. My name is Karun Avatar. With me, as per usual, my dear co-host Jai Jagannath Prabhu, and today we have a very special guest with us, His Grace Kaustubha Prabhu, and this is quite a first. Well, firstly, it's our Conscious Relationships series, the 4th episode thereof, and Jai Jagannath Prabhu was just saying just before we went live. Our first episode, we had Virabhadra Ram and Jai Giridhari, and then the second episode, we had their wives, Shama and Dhyana, and then we had, and they had such an idyllic story, just the way that they came to, and just everything about it was just like, complete fairy tale. And I'm sure if they're hearing this, they'd be like, oh, come on, what are you talking about? The subjective experience is always different than the way we perceive it from the outside. And then we had Bali and Danya, and they also just had such a deeply heart-touching, like Jai and I were so moved. We were just really so touched. And now it's the 4th episode, and Kaustubha Prabhu is with us, and he's going to be telling us about his marriage, which is in so many ways very different from the couples that we'd spoken to before, and there's so much to unpack. And Kaustubha Prabhu's situation is also quite unique in some ways. So yes, Prabhu, thank you so much for agreeing to come, and we really look forward to hearing your wisdom about this very universally applicable subject matter.
Well, it's always an honor to be here with you guys. I hope I can live up to those other couples. Those are some serious. That's a serious lineup. But I'll do my best. All great people, all people that are very dear to me.
Right. I like to just for our own protection. Kaustubha's wife is super shy. That's why she's not here on the episode with us. So that's just a protection for us, because people get real sensitive about these things these days. We're going to open it up. I always open up the Conscious Relationships episode with this quote that in the West, you marry the girl that you love. And in the East, you love the girl that you marry.
I've heard that before.
Yeah, I don't know who that is attributed to, but it's I've heard it many times in the Hare Krishna movement, usually as a pejorative against Western culture. But I guess the contrast here is between like a more emotive reason for entering into a relationship versus a more dutiful or dharmic reason. So I kind of wanted to hear your wisdom on this phrase, what comes to mind for you, and also your experience, which of the side of this coin was it for you?
When I hear that phrase, I wonder, did it come from the Gandhi movie maybe or something like that?
Maybe. That's what I feel like I heard it was from Gandhi or something, but anyway, yeah.
Okay. So my first overall thought on that is it's a very general thought. But it's that in general, the way that we practice bhakti or yoga or spirituality, whatever maybe, however you want to define it, it's the challenge is that you have this philosophy and culture that we'll call it timeless, that goes way, way, way back, and I have faith that there's wisdom in it, but how to apply it in the bizarre world that we live in, and I see our world as bizarre.
Totally.
I mean, I guess I'm seeing it. I guess I'm seeing it through the eyes of those teachings. But seeing it through the eyes of those teachings, I believe we live in a bizarre world. I believe a lot of people that don't see it through those eyes see it as a bizarre world, and there's a lot of bizarre stuff going on.
Right.
But how do you apply it in a way that it's effective, that it works? So that's the challenge: how to translate it, how to take what's helpful, sometimes leave behind what won't be helpful. You had Ravenel
Yes.
on recently, and we also had him on our show on Wisdom of the Sages. And I think that especially on our show, but also on yours, that was a lot of the theme was, how do you take from tradition what's valuable and applied in such a way that it works. And sometimes you're trying to apply it and it doesn't work at all. And actually you're getting, it turns into some, in that case, which was the subject was the education or lack thereof for Indian young ladies.
Right.
It can actually become destructive, clinging to culture if it's not done with some level of wisdom, how it applies right now. And so that being said, I believe that there's to a Western person, the idea of arranged marriage, it sounds like, I would imagine to many people, it sounds like cruelty. And, I mean,
Yeah.
like,
definitely.
like a severe form of oppression. That how can you not allow me to choose the person who I'm going to marry? Or how could you even get so involved in it? Because I think when we say arranged marriage, there's many different gradations that it might
Right.
be. Like it might be like the parents are the active ones finding the candidates, but if the bride or groom are really not into it, they might say, okay, well, we're not going to make it happen. So,
Right.
but and I'm sure there's other arranged marriages like, no, this is what it's going to be, and this is the person that you're going to marry. But I get it. I don't have a hard time understanding why a Western mind would see that as oppressive. But at the same time, a lot of what's going on in our culture, our Western culture, from another perspective, would seem very bizarre and almost cruel. Like, how could you neglect your loved one, your child, so much that they're this age and they're not married and they're going out to bars and they're if you really look at what is the mating ritual in the Western world,
I get to look at it every day here in East Village.
That's right. Just have to look out your window, and you can see, the idea. If you really examine it, it's really lacking insight. That largely takes place in bars late at night. Sex has so much to do with it. So many tragedies happen because of this bizarre, how did that happen, right? Like, how did pickup bars and singles bars and bars in general, become like the place where you're supposed to meet someone, to marry? It is weird. where doesn't it make a lot more sense that the people that care about you most and have taken, great pains throughout their life to see to your best interest are involved in it, rather than you go out there on their own and, so I can see both perspectives, and I think the question is how to best apply it. And I'm not saying one way is right and one way is wrong. So all that being said, what? And I'll say this too, that just like I have certain political beliefs, like I believe that if you have the right leader, that almost any system will function relatively well. Like if you give me the right leader, communist government, I'll accept. Capitalist government, I'll accept. Something in between, I'll accept. If you have the right person with the right competence and the right, good-hearted intention, then that's the most important thing. And if you don't have that, then none of these systems work well. And I think you could say the same thing. In this kind of question, would arranged marriage could be a wonderful thing, and for many people it is, if the parents are sensitive and intelligent and really care. Ravenel's film showed instances where the parents economically were under such extreme pressure, and the dowry and all these things just created such a level of difficulty that it kind of can bring out the worst, and parents can become
tyrants.
Tyrants and callous to the circumstance of their daughter. The social pressures that are involved, the financial pressures that are involved, it can make that system really oppressive. And so I think that it either way could work well if you have the right people behind them. But in my own marriage, honestly, I thought about it, and I think it's kind of a bit of both. When I decided that I wanted to get married, I didn't know who my wife would be. I just knew that I want to make this change in my life. I want to get married. And when that got out there,
that got out there, that phrasing just sounds so funny, because you were a brahmachari before for like 13 years, right?
Yes.
So I could just that language you use when it got out there. Like I'm just picturing myself when I was leaving the ashram. If it got out there. Okay, yeah, just creating some context there.
Yeah, even more context is because when I was discussing it with my guru, he said, just don't tell anybody for some time. I forget. Honestly, I don't even remember exactly the reason, but he said, just don't tell anyone for some time. And I said, fine. But I had already told one person. And I wasn't either, it slipped my mind, or I wasn't aggressive enough to follow up with that person. So then the word did get out, and my guru was like, I told you not to tell anyone. That's like, I told him, I had told him already. But when it got out there, there were friends of mine, like peers, both male and female, as well as like mentors of mine, who were all saying, oh, we know just the girl for you. You just, so I was open to the idea, and that did turn out to be my wife, Gita Priya. So there were certainly, it wasn't an arranged marriage for sure, but there were like mentors and people that were kind of like bringing us together, I suppose you could say. But at the same time, it was clearly our own decisions, what we were going to do. So a little bit of both.
Can we get a little bit more of that story?
Which one?
I just want to say there's so much juice coming out here already, and I know that we're going to unpack so much. But just before we move on, I just want to highlight Danya's comment, because it's really brilliant.
Okay.
Maybe ideal arranged marriages could be healthy families courting other healthy families. Each family member is committed to integrity and self-realization as a way of expanding the family and connecting to other families that way. Yeah, Prabhu, maybe just some thoughts on that. That's brilliant as always.
I'm blushing as I normally do when Danya says basically anything. And it makes it makes sense. I think when we hear about arranged marriages, like even when entering Hare Krishna movement and hearing about this being the system, in my head it was just images of like abuse going on, because my own lived experience culturally was one. I mean, I grew up in a single mother household, and most of my friends did as well, and those who didn't had like abusive parents. And so when you're coming from that sort of background and you hear arranged marriage, arranged by the family, I'm like, these, and they insert expletive, they're going to be making the arrangements. It's just like, nah, homie, I'm not going to agree to that. Right. And so, just to Daniel's point, it makes a lot of sense if that were the case, and it's not the case. And so, and that's...
But imagine you have, male or female, if you have a father and a mother that are intelligent and really care about you and have learned a lot in their lives and have become wiser, and they understand a lot about marriage and about family life, and they know that there's this family over here, with a quote unquote suitable spouse, and they know that they could help arrange a situation where you're going to be cared for, and you're going to be in a loving circumstance that's healthy and conducive to your material and spiritual well-being. And they're not going to allow you to have to go out there and try to figure it out yourself, and likely it doesn't work well, and there's a lot of pain, a lot of suffering, and abuse. So I've seen that. I've seen it done well. And so, if again, from a person for a person from Western background, they may have a very hard time conceiving of that. But when you see it, you can understand it. And again, someone could, for instance, I know I have many friends, women that are, in their late 30s, going into their 40s, intelligent, beautiful, talented, good-hearted people that they have trouble like finding a decent man that's responsible and caring and loving towards them, that's not wanting to run around to another woman next and bounce from one to the other and ready to commit. So there's problems on potential problems on both sides of that equation for sure. Yeah.
Very true.
But oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you go. I was about to get into I want to hear more of the story.
Well, that's where I was going. Yeah. And so maybe I'll go back a little bit. And I don't know, maybe we keep going back and back. I don't know how far back we go. But I remember that when I visited my guru, who's Tamal Krishna Goswami, and he was, when I was considering changing ashram, considering getting married after 13 years as a brahmachari. And I think a lot of people expected that I was going to kind of like be a lifelong, brahmachari, sannyasi, whatever. So I visited him in Cambridge University where he was living, and I stayed with him for 3 days on my way to India for like 3 months or something like that. And so I had already communicated to him that I was considering this. I think a lot of people at the time, especially at that, they assumed that my guru, he was kind of like had this reputation as a staunch sannyasi. And I think a lot of people assumed that he would try to convince me not to, but he didn't at all, actually. And but what he did do was he sat down and talked to me and said, so what do you want to do? And I said, well, I'm not sure. I'll share two things that he said to me. And both of these were some of my most memorable instructions from him. I said, first of all, at the moment, it seems to me like both paths are dark. Right? Yeah. I said, it seems, like staying brahmachari for different reasons. It's at that point in my life, it seemed like, I don't know, I don't know if I'll be happy. I don't know if this is really the life I want to live. And at the same time, as having lived as a monk, having lived simply, having had the opportunity to live exclusively for devotional service, there was certainly a fear in me that I might lose that by getting married, and that I might, in a sense, be compromising my freedom to serve, fully. So there was that side too. What to speak of whatever other potential, life issues could arise out of it.
I just can imagine as a brahmachari, deciding to get married. Hitpatma patam grihamanda kupam.
Well, all those instructions are there.
Right.
Yeah. So I expressed that to him. It was great because I could honestly express myself to him, and he was, super sharp and super intelligent, and he said to me, "No, it's actually quite the opposite. Both paths are very bright." He said it like that, and he said, either you stay brahmachari, and if you do, things will be great. You'll be free to do what you want, and I forget what he said, but he was saying, no, both paths are bright. And if you get married, then hey, you get married and you serve, and you'll be happy that way. Just him saying that was I felt a lot of, when he said it, I had confidence in it, actually. His conviction was conveyed from one heart to the next, just through his words. When he said that, it kind of freed me from some fogginess that my head was in. And then he said, so what do you want to do? And I said, well, I'm not in a rush right now. Honestly, because I think I was 33 years old at the time. And so my thoughts were, if I'm going to get married, I'm going to do it now. I don't want to wait, another till I'm 40 or something like that, and then decide I want to get married. So if I'm going to do it, now's the time. I was thinking like that. So it was kind of like walk through one door or the other now, but no turning back. And so he said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "I'm not sure, but I'm not in a big hurry. You know, I'm going to India in a few days, and I'll be there for a few months, and you know, maybe I'll have some time to think about it and decide what's best." And so then he said this to me, and I never forget this. And I think some people might feel like this is a little bit heavy or something like that, but honestly, I think it was absolutely fantastic advice. And what he said was, "I don't think you need to go to India and think about it. I think everything that you need to know to make this decision, you know right now. And you just need to be honest with yourself and make a decision."
Wow.
So you're going to leave in 3 days. By the time you leave, you should know what you're going to do. Yeah. And
Wow.
actually, when he said that, I thought he's right. You know, it's like it's hard in life. There are certain points, you know, those crossroads in life where you have to walk through a door and not turn back, and it can be scary. You know, it can be really scary, but you have to have faith. You know, you have to have faith in God. You know, and in Krishna, that like, okay, I want to serve you. I want to give my life to you. I have to make this decision. I don't know what's going to happen. You know, I don't know. I don't know what will come by making either choice, but I'm gonna walk through the door, and I'm not gonna turn back. And so he said that to me, and I took that in, you know. And within 3 days, I had made my decision.
So it means 3
Wow.
days you met Gita Priya and like, all right, we're gonna
No,
do
no,
this.
no, no, no. In 3 days, I
Yeah.
decided I was gonna get married.
Okay.
That's all.
Okay, you made the decision.
Yeah.
But when you made the decision, Prabhu, after 3 days, I imagine you indicated that to him. Was it at that point in time where he told you, "Don't tell anyone," but you had already? When was that?
That was within those 3 days. It was like it's probably like the third day or something like that, as I was about to leave.
Right.
So I want to get to the part where you actually meet Gita Priya, that part of the story. Yeah.
You know,
You gave us a little bit of the backstory now.
Sure. So I was changing ashram and changing service as well. And so I had 13 years of brahmacharya as a background, and as book distribution as a background. And now my question was not only, you know, again, it's like it's not, my position at that point was not only as like being a monk and stepping into another ashram. It wasn't only having this intimate relationship with another person, but it was also, you know, what to speak of having children, but it was also in terms of my occupation. What was I going to do? And I didn't know at that point, to be honest. I had some faith, I suppose you could say, that the background that I had now, like, in other words, I consider my 13 years of brahmacharya as my, you know, college studies and postgraduate studies. You know, like I was learning something, right? Yeah, and hopefully that's something that you can share and give back to the world with. You should become expert at something, you know. So I suppose I had some faith that there was some way that I would be able to use that. Although I suppose I was figuring that it was going to mean some kind of relatively simple grihastha life, you know, economically.
Right.
And so, but I had to figure out what I was going to do, and an opportunity came up, which was to become the temple president of the Boston Temple, which was a place that I had spent some years with and had a connection with, maybe 10 years before that or so. But a place that I liked, you know. So I spoke with Niranjana Swami about it, who was the GBC there at that time. And he welcomed me to that position. I said, I heard this position's open. And he said, yes, I would love that. You know, you're welcome to come and take that role. And Gita Priya lived in that temple also. So I guess you could say that was coincidental. Yeah. And so then, and I'll say this, you know, when the day that I was going to the Boston Temple, I think I had met him in Connecticut, Hartford. And then we drove together I think it was when we were there in Connecticut where he asked me, "Do you know who you're going to marry? You know, is that?" And I said, "No, I don't." And Gita Priya is his disciple, and so he started to say something, and then he held back. And I said, "Are you Gita Priya? Like, is that what you're about to say?" You know.
Are
And
you?
and he said, "Yes, actually." And he said, "I don't want to kind of impose anything on you right now." Like he wanted to say, "Oh, you know, I know, you know," as a father to his disciple, you know, he wanted to suggest it. But I think out of sensitivity and consideration for my position, he kind of held his tongue and didn't suggest it. But I kind of had a feeling that maybe that was what was on his mind. So then, you know, we met as I'm the temple president and she was a person that was living in the temple. So that's, you know, how we met. But I guess you want to go further and say, like, how did it develop?
Yeah, you were like, "Hey, my Guru Maharaj think I should marry you. So do my other friends.
Actually,
You want to do this?"
Not my Guru Maharaj, her Guru Maharaj.
Okay,
maybe,
her Guru
yeah,
Maharaj. Okay,
yeah.
right.
My Guru didn't know her.
Okay, right.
But I suppose what happened was, you know, I had an opportunity to kind of like observe her, you know, observe how she served and how she related with people and so on. And I was very impressed, you know, you know, so after, I don't know, maybe, I don't really know, it was maybe a couple months or something like that, or a month or two, something like that. I approached, Niranjan Swami, and I mentioned it, you know, like, you know, you mentioned it and now I'm thinking it too, you know. So, you know, what I did was, because it's kind of awkward, you know, you're in a temple and, you know,
Totally.
she's not into it, or, you know. So what I did was I went away for the weekend, and Niranjana Swami, I think it was Niranjana Swami, mentioned it to her as I left. So she could have just a couple of days to kind of like chill and think about it and give me my answer. And I would know before I came back, or at least, you know, whether she was interested in not getting married, but like pursuing that idea. So that's what I did. And then she was, you know, open to it. So then I came back, and from that point on, you know, some of your questions had to deal with the courtship, you know, time.
Right.
You know, it was honestly very smooth. You know, I think we clicked. I think we had a mutual appreciation for each other, mutual respect. And honestly, it's not like there was ever some moment where I got down on my knee and proposed or anything like that. You know, it was almost like without our saying it, I think at a certain point, it was just kind of assumed that we were going to get married. I don't even know how far down the line that was, you know, but it was just kind of, it felt very natural to us. And it was about a little over a year after that we got married.
Wow. So after the marriage, I don't know, you want to ask something? I have my next question, which I always ask. A romantic versus realistic experience of the marriage relationship. Now with you, I think it's going to be.
I just feel like the Kaustubha Prabhu situation has so much of both of those, you know, like I feel it's really romantic, as Dave Madhava Prabhu said, like her Guru Maharaj, Niranjan Maharaj, suggesting it in the first place, and then, you know, sort of coming, because it's like, it's such a thing. I'm just thinking about it from Gita Priya's perspective, you know, like it's like your spiritual master tells you that this person is interested in potentially, you know, making you the person that they want to share their life. That's like the biggest compliment that you could possibly get, you know. It's really, it's such a sweet thing. And I mean, I just, like, if I was her and Prabhu, when you came back from that weekend, I would be like so, like, totally shy and bashful and just like deeply you know, touched and fuzzy and stuff. So
I don't know, from a woman's perspective, maybe like they get these these things come up in their lives, and a lot of them they're not welcome, so it's like I didn't know if she was like, that guy, forget it, why did they even have to bring this up? Now I got a temple president that like is into me and I'm not into him. It could have been very different.
Right.
I'm a hopeless romantic, so I tend to go for that side of things.
That's why I
Anyway.
wanted to at least give her a weekend where like I'm not like bumping into her in the hallways and all that.
Oh my God, awkward. Yeah, so I'm wondering after marriage. Now, I feel like this question is going to be a little bit interesting with you. The question that I normally ask is that a lot of us, because the previous couples were a little bit younger and we grew up, millennial generation, our vision of the romantic relationship is romantic. And then after getting involved, you start to see like the real parts of it. And it can be like, well, it leads to a lot of divorce and separation and so on. So I feel like with you, it's maybe slightly different because you've already indicated, with all of that brahmacharya training and monasticism, our vision of the romantic relationship is not romantic. It's like scary, I could lose my
Right.
bhakti, and then the realistic experience of actually being married. So how did that work out for you?
Somehow I don't know why, but I mentioned earlier I was both paths looked a little dark, but I kind of got over that bump.
Right.
And there was part of me for sure that was like ready to relate with women and happy to, in ways that I couldn't do as a brahmachari, even in terms of friendship.
Right.
So I was kind of for me that transition just felt good and natural and happy. And I'm not exactly sure exactly what question I'm answering right now. Maybe you could rephrase it for me.
The question is the romantic vision of marriage life versus the actual experience of it.
Long term now you're asking.
Yeah, long term. Like, usually people after I've heard this from several friends, not naming names, but I've heard it from several friends after they got married, especially those first years.
Yeah.
I remember one friend told me with the uttermost gravity, he looked at me and said, "Jai, I made a mistake." And I've heard this from several friends, and they're still married, and I would even say they're happily married even now. But in those initial years, kind of whatever. And another thing that I often hear is that I really thought I was going to be supported in my sadhana and this and that. We were going to do japa walks together. It's like all this sort of romantic vision of what it's going to be like versus what actually happens once you enter. And so I'm asking, was there a contrasting experience for you? Like, was there a romantic vision of it, or maybe not a romantic vision? And then once you've entered into marriage life, what was the actual experience?
Yeah, it was pretty smooth. The whole thing was pretty smooth. I guess you're using romantic here as like optimistic.
Right.
And
yes.
We're kind of interesting people. It's kind of not. It's not. My wife, before she became a devotee, she was practically on her way to join Mother Teresa in Calcutta and join that order. That's what she was thinking of doing with her life. Yeah. She had two brothers that were devotees, who I knew as friends. Yeah. So one of her brothers said, before you do that, just come and stay with me for a while in this temple. And so then she did that, and she never, that kind of detoured her trip to Mother Teresa. But I share that to express that I think even karmically, she was simple, in terms of how she wanted to live. And and she had also been brahmacharini, for 7 years, I think, too. And I was, of course, had, for 13 years I had been a brahmachari. So I think both of us had kind of one of your questions had to do with how to find out if people have the same
values.
Values. Yeah,
Yes.
values. And so, you wrote me the questions, and there was like, you mentioned something about a checklist. Is that like a thing, like an actual checklist that goes around nowadays or something like that?
Okay. We'll come to that later in the episode, but I can give the context for how that.
Okay. Well, I was just going to say that, we did sit down and talk, and I felt very confident that she had the kind of values that I wanted in a wife. And what I expressed to her, what I wanted to honestly express to her, is that this is how I picture my life. That I don't think I'm gonna be making a lot of money, and what I would like to do with my life is live relatively simple. I do want to use the background that I have, and I'm anticipating that it's not gonna be super lucrative. So I picture living without a car. I picture living in a small apartment. This is what I'm picturing that, life with me would be like, living simply. I was assuming that we would have children. But still somehow it would be a relatively simple circumstance. Relatively, I don't know if austere is the right word, but like relatively simple. And she, expressed, her immediate response was like, yeah, that's what I want too. And to her credit, she's lived up to that, more than I would even expect. So I think that level of expectation on both of our parts has made it, you're using the term romantic, but I would say like, our optimism was largely
measured.
Well, yeah. No, I was going to actually say met. Like in other words, I anticipated. I was hoping for a happy relationship with the person that was going to live simply, that would have genuine affection for each other, that our life styles and our contribution would be meaningful. And I didn't have. I don't think either of us felt like, oh, there was a honeymoon period and then the whole thing just, the real thing kind of manifested in it, and we started to really doubt whether we made the right decision. No, it was pretty smooth. It was pretty smooth, and I really credit her a lot for that.
That's incredible. What I'm getting is that you'd entered into the whole thing very soberly and very sattvically. Very sattvically. I think that's really the key element, and that's also just like in terms of some of your other some of the other phenomena in your relationship, like the fact that you and Gita Priya don't have children, and how that actually manifested or didn't manifest, and how anyway, just so much sattva goodness required for that. So I'm because the like getting into relationships and relationships themselves as they unfold, just I think it's just so much more common and universal for excessive Rajagun to be involved, and that's where I feel like expectations get misconstrued, and then a lot of conflict arises. And so just I'm very, very inspired by the very sattvic energy coming through. And once again, I want to highlight Danya's question here. Do you feel your brahmacharya education gave you the tools and skills to build a healthy marriage, not just philosophically, but practically and relationally?
I do. Yeah, actually, I do. And I'll share how, like, at least what first comes to my mind in response to that question.
Because you said you do, I just want to share this. No.
Okay.
Contrast, but okay.
So I'll share my thoughts, and maybe Damodar Prasad will be able to understand why. My whole brahmacharya was even a little different because I never joined a temple. Actually, I Gunagrahi Goswami.
Wow.
He invited me to come travel with him. That's how I joined up, say. So I never was under a temple president. I was never, I was kind of had this sannyasi kind of just freelancing me in a sense, like I would go over here and spend time with these brahmacharis. I'd go over there and spend time with those brahmacharis. And then at a certain point, my Guru Maharaj settled in Dallas because he was going to go to university there. I had experience with my Guru in Dallas, on occasion. But at that point, I began to spend a lot more time in Texas and spend a lot more time with him in that area. And that circumstance was like there was a temple. He was the guru for most of the community there. They all had little homes, like surrounding the temple. So it was an actual grihasta community for real. And he, people say a lot of stuff about, sannyasis getting involved in grihastas. I can understand how that can be problematic. But what I saw there was like a really strong, tight-knit community where the guru, his involvement in that kind of world, and it wasn't something imposed without qualification. It was like he had a lot of brilliant advice to give. And I think maybe to the surprise of a lot of people, it was really well-tempered kind of, usually it was going against the grain of what a lot of someone's brahmachari training in ISKCON may have been. It was more like, hey, open your eyes. For a marriage to work practically, you've got to be like this. You got to earn some money. You got to take care of her. You got, he had a lot of insight that cut through a lot of the, I don't know, maybe stereotypical kind of brahmachari, narrow-mindedness, maybe. I don't know exactly how to characterize it, but what I saw that person who was, if not the, certainly a primary figure in my life, primary mentor in my life. I saw how he valued that ashram. I saw how he would instill respect for women from men, in that I would more commonly see him upset with a husband for his lack of responsibility than I would see something like him criticizing a husband for their lack of Krishna consciousness or surrender or that kind of thing. You understand?
Yeah.
Yeah. He would more lean like, hey, this is dharma. This is what it means. You're a husband. You get responsible here, and you really have to care. So in that sense, I think it gave me not only the example to see that, but also through that lens to look at Shastra and see where I see that kind of message coming out. So yeah, in response to Dunya, I do feel it did, and I think it's largely due to his influence.
Wow. Cool.
Sure. And just I don't think I just wanted to say, Kaustubha Prabhu, I don't think that we've actually mentioned your Guru Maharaj's name. It's Tamal Krishna Goswami,
That's
right?
Yes.
Yes, just so that everyone is aware of that. Jai, what did you want to say? I have a sort of a
okay, sorry. Tamal Krishna
No,
Goswami,
I have like a side tangent question.
He has his reputation of being like scary. The stories that I've heard about Tamal Krishna Maharaj.
It's all true. It's all true.
But then to also hear this other side and to see that example, having that example and having that example as a lens by which you could also view Shastra and how that informs your own grihastha relationship, that's also very interesting.
Yeah. I don't know if you're right. He was scary. In a loving and in an important way, like in a way that was like important for training. But I don't think everybody knows the full the multifaceted kind of character that he was.
Yes. I'm sorry, Criminal Avatar, you go. I was determined to get that scary part out for some reason.
That's great. I have one question which is like in a bit of a side tangent category, but I do think will be important and relatable for a lot of people. But I'll get to that a little later. Because I think right now, just as it would be very central to this discussion, and it's one of our main themes, I'd like to take it to how it came to be that that you and Gita Priya never had children and seemingly consciously decided, or I don't know, I'm assuming right now, but just tell us about that.
Sure. First, I would say I wouldn't advise a married couple not to have children. I think
Why
in
is
general,
that?
yeah, I
Why
think
is
in general it's helpful as part of the ashram, and I think I'll say particularly for the wife, particularly for women, but also for men. I think it can potentially be I don't know, psychologically, but it potentially it can become problematic in one's life if you're wanting that, and you don't get it. And I think it potentially can be helpful, just in terms of one's development as a selfless, caring, loving person. And I think that if as a brahmachari, I think a lot of people also assumed that it was like my idea not to have children, and he's kind of like taking his brahmachari thing and imposing it. But I say that I believe that if a man, say you've been a brahmachari, if a man marries a woman, he owes her children if that's what she wants. So I'm putting that out there first, and so I assumed that we would be having children. And we were together for a little over a year before we got married, and then we got married. And it wasn't long after that, within a month or two, that my wife expressed to me that we don't have to have children if it's not what you want to do. And I said to her, well, I don't feel the need to do. I think if I had children, I would love my children. It'd be a big part of my life, obviously. But I also don't feel like a need to have children, an emotional need to have children. And but I said to her, but you need to think very carefully about it. I'm happy to do whatever you want to do, but if we're going to have children, now would be the time to do it. I'm 30, I guess 35 at that point, and she's 34. I'm saying, if we're going to have children, now should be the time. So think real carefully about what you want to do. But I'm either way, I'm happy. And shortly thereafter, she said, no, I prefer not to, actually. She said she became a Montessori teacher at that time. And she said, I'm happy to go and be with the children and kind of serve the children and all that. But I'm also happy to be able to close the door on that at the end of the day and walk away from it, and kind of be free of that. So it was her decision. I was honestly, there might've been some relief on my part, I'm sure there's part of me that would have loved to have been a father and so on, but but at the same time, I knew it was going to make life a lot more simple. I knew that with my limited, financial, background, that it was going to make much easier. Now, if you have two people that can potentially work now, and you have, much less of a, it means more income and less expense. So I knew, okay, well, financially, we're going to have a lot less to worry about. So there may have been some relief on my part, but I definitely left it in her hands.
I like to explore this, just maybe it's a little bit more theoretical, but just you use this language. I didn't feel the need to have children. And I wonder, how do you think about that in terms of it like being the duty to have children? And I feel like this comes up a lot when hearing about more traditional cultures.
Yeah.
That it's like whether it's you like it or not, whether you love someone or not, it's like, this is your duty, this must be done. And I grew up watching martial art flicks and these sorts of movies where it's like about honor. Meaning your duty. Yeah. I'm not gonna lie, I don't know if I should say this I'm in public. But I've been rewatching with a friend the Avatar series, The Last
Okay.
Airbender, which is a very nice show that I like personally. I think it's great storytelling, and
That's
a
that
lot of
cartoon.
it's a cartoon.
I didn't know it was a series.
Yeah, it's a cartoon. It had 3 seasons. Anyway, super
Okay.
good storytelling, and a lot of themes come up in the story. It's about duty, it's about honor,
Yeah.
and so it's maybe a little bit theoretical, but I do think it's meaningful as a lot of young people are hearing our podcast, young men, women also, and they'll be entering into relationships. And nowadays it's just like, well, if I want to, I do it. And if I don't want to, I don't do it, which is not what you're saying for your personal experience, but that's a lot. It comes up for our generation. And you mentioned how I wouldn't recommend not having kids because there's something that you get. It helps you to increase your selflessness. And all our previous couples have shared that precise point, that they did not know what selflessness really was until they had children, which is a very fascinating thing that they all said unprompted. And so this need versus like the responsibility of the ashram, like how would you navigate that to someone who's asking about that, to you specifically? Like, I don't really feel the need, and like, okay, whether you feel the need or not, obviously there's mature conversation between the couples. So this is maybe more of a theoretical framework that I'm asking, but just some words of wisdom of how we might think about it. And one other point about this, like a society can't maintain itself unless they have children. It's like simple as that. And I know in America, for example, where people are less prone to have children, it's becoming a bit of an issue because in order to replace your population, couples need to be having at least 2 kids. And not to sound too inflammatory, but I'm thinking of like Islam is one of the fastest growing religions, not primarily because of conversion, but because they have a lot of kids. And we're just going to leave it at that. They have a lot of kids. And in this way, they're just outpopulating certain demographics just because they're having children. And so when you think about our own Christian conscious society, I mean, one way of making devotees is preaching, but the other and perhaps more efficient method of making devotees is having kids. And if you really want your society to continue to blossom, that's like an important responsibility of the community. Now, I say this as a person without a relationship, without children, all that. I'm just putting, that's why I'm keeping that theoretical framework. Don't come after me. Okay. I just think it's something interesting to contemplate, this tension between, I don't feel the need, but is it my responsibility to have children? Yeah.
Okay.
Danya has another. I just want to highlight this, that Danya's question also amplifies this point, and I want to bring it in now. Do you feel that your wife is somehow dharmically unfulfilled as a woman, having chosen not to have children? Many traditionalists would suggest something along those lines.
Could you let's pull that up one more time.
Sure.
Do you feel your wife is somehow dharmically unfulfilled as having chosen not to have children? Okay, well, let me in response to that, but in directly response to what Jai's brought up. I mentioned that I feel like if a wife is ready to dedicate herself to a husband should be ready to give her children if that's what she wants. I believe that's a responsibility. I believe that if 2 people are having sex, that they should accept the responsibility of that as well. So that's another reason why it becomes one's responsibility. I don't feel a particular responsibility to any society to repopulate it at this stage.
I threw that out there as a theoretical.
I got you. And I could understand in a more, if we had a more tight-knit community or something like that might actually kind of be part of a consideration, but it's definitely not a consideration of mine at this point,
Right.
But you mentioned, I think maybe you mentioned how my situation or our situation, mine and my wife's situation, is different from the earlier guests that you had.
Well, because you didn't have children, and I guess from what you're saying now, maybe there's a practice of celibacy, which is kind of unique.
Yeah. And so even before getting to that, what I would say is one difference that I see between the life that Gita Priya and I had led up until marriage, there's a difference between that and the life of all the previous people that you mentioned before two. First,
True.
except for Jai, they were all already devotees, born devotees.
Right.
Oh, yeah, all of them. But another thing is that Gita Priya and I were brought up in the world of your selflessness is expressed through Sankirtan, like you're you know, like really selflessly, like
Right.
you live in a van with 4 other guys and you do nothing but sell Prabhupada's books like every day, all day. It's kind of like whether it's hot or cold, whether it's a blizzard out there or whether it's 110 degrees, you're out there doing that. So we were both very trained in another way to cultivate selflessness, which was you take every day of your life and you use it to to distribute Krishna consciousness to people. And my Guru Maharaj spoke at my wedding, and he said that I think he may have drawn upon that example that Srila Prabhupada gave, that someone asked him, I'm getting married now, Srila Prabhupada, what's my duty? And he said the duty of the householder is that before they eat, they're meant to step outside on the front porch,
Yes.
right? And call out to the entire neighborhood, we're about to eat now, and if anybody's hungry, you come and we'll feed you now. Which to me is a really important instruction. And maybe this is something that we can discuss as well. In other words, when you look at Varnashram Dharma, I think there are important elements of it that we can draw out of. But going back to my original statement, that how to take from it what's potent and applicable and helpful in this day and age. But I think maybe even more than Varna, when it comes to ashrama, that this stuff can become really meaningful in our lives. And so grihasta, my understanding of what grihasta means in general is that, and as Prabhupada would point out, it's the only ashram where you're dealing with all those really tricky things for a yogi, in particular money and sex, right? That you do have the license to engage in these, and you can go ahead and find your material happiness through them legally, in a sense, right? In this ashram, like you are granted that freedom. But because it's the only ashram where you're making money, it means that you're supposed to support everybody. You become the servant, right? So you're the one that has to. The vanaprastha doesn't do this, but the speaker of the sannyasi and the brahmachari doesn't have to do this. They don't have to go outside and call out to everybody, hey, if you're hungry, come and I'm going to feed you. They don't take up that responsibility. The person that's making the money in this world is supposed to take up that responsibility. Once you take the pleasures that come with making money, you have to take the responsibility that comes with making money. And that means it's my job to care for people. So when I was at the ceremony, my wedding ceremony, my Guru Maharaj said, I think he definitely brought up the topic, and I think he brought up that exact that statement from Prabhupada. And he said, but I think he said, so the business, the duty of the grihasta is to give in charity. And he said, but with these two, I don't think it's going to be financial charity that they give. I think it'll be a different kind of charity that they give. Which I don't know if he said it, but certainly we understood it as meaning sharing Krishna consciousness with people. So where it's healthy for a grihasta couple to cultivate selflessness through the selfless care that they provide for their children. I like to think that in my marriage, the same principle is there, but it's expressed in a different way. That's how I understood my duty.
That's beautifully put, Prabhu. That the principle of selflessness is something which is in fact much broader, and that we certainly don't deny, and I'm not getting that from you, that having children is perhaps one of the most just very powerful ways to experience that selflessness, because you really have no other choice in the matter. But I think that in your case, since you and Gita Priya are very brahmanically orientated, that that you're able to make the conscious decision consistently to give selflessly in a different way, and to be giving Krishna consciousness to others. But I think, it just once again, to me, is very evident of a higher, more sattvic way of approaching things. And I think being so brahmanically orientated as you are, it becomes a viable means of selflessness for you.
I mean, we have to be careful that we're actually living up to that. I'm not saying that we always do, but we try to.
Can I get into this other piece that's a little bit, unique? You was like, okay, if you're having sex, you should, take the responsibility of doing so and have children. And you guys decided not to have children. Does that indicate like a celibate practice? I mean, it's a little, I hope it's not a strange question. And if so, like, what? I know this is not, because this is the Honest Man's podcast, and I'm speaking honestly here. Whenever most, at least men, because I don't usually talk to women about this, but most men that I've talked to, although it's not the only consideration, the overwhelming consideration for getting married is that sex part. Like, maybe just not the proper language for articulating it because of immaturity, but basically this is the general thing that you'll hear. Prabhu, I got sex desire. And Pong Sastra Maituni Bhava Me Tam, Tayormita Hridaya Granti Ahu, man and woman come together because of sex desire and their hearts are tied together, and et cetera, et cetera. So that's a huge motivating factor for young couples, especially, which makes perfect sense. I don't think that's a negative, by the way, but then making the decision to maybe not have kids and maybe to practice more celibacy, that's a pretty major decision. Like, what? I mean, can we get some insight about that? That's very unique. And
yeah, I understand that it's unique.
Yeah.
I generally don't talk about it.
Yeah, I obviously it's awkward. Like,
not even because I just think a lot of people within the devotee community, I'm happy to talk about it, but I think others would have a really hard time understanding it.
Right. Well, we're devotees, sir.
Yeah, it's mostly
hearing our audience of devotees right now.
Yeah.
So.
I think that for neither of us was our motivation in getting married like that, like what you're describing.
Right.
And I almost feel like, making that shift from brahmacharya to grihastha, there was that fear that I might, the potential to kind of lose my edge, you could say, like of staying, as exclusively as possibly devoted to serving and so on, and get caught up in material enjoyment and so on. And I think somehow my wife's simplicity made that transition easier than I anticipated. And so, when people will say things about sexuality like, oh, it's an important way that a husband and wife express their love for one another.
Right. Yeah.
Psychologically, it's really important. Maybe for some people, I'm going to say this, and I don't mean to sound callous or judgmental, but only if there's a lack of knowledge, right? Like only if there's a lack of, and I'm not saying that I'm, fully in possession of transcendental knowledge, but it's only a lack of knowledge that has us convinced that we need anything outside of our own Krishna consciousness to be happy in this world. And so to me, the Grihastha ashram is to help us realize that, right? And this is why, I think one of your questions had to do with like, how do I see the world differently now? Like after
the change
it'll be 20 years of marriage in a couple months. So after 20 years of marriage, how do I see the world differently than I did as a brahmachari before marriage?
Right.
And I think if I were to say one thing most important, it's that I saw things in a more simplistic way when I was younger, particularly as a brahmachari. Like I thought the answers are quite simple, right? Like the person that's more spiritually advanced is the one that's living the more simple lifestyle because, but you know, as you go through the years and you see so many different examples, you know, you begin to realize these are different paths all going to the same thing. And the fact that you're on a particular path, it doesn't necessarily, you can find quotes from Prabhupada that you could use to argue against what I'm about to say, but you could also find quotes that would support what I'm about to say. I've seen sannyasis be as petty as anyone. And I've also seen them have spiritual crashes, you know, as more devastating than others. And I've seen grihastas who, I'll share you one thing that my guru shared with me also. And as a matter of fact, now that I'm saying this, I realize it was also in those 3 days where we were talking about myself getting married. And he said, amongst my friends, which meant I understood who he may have even given names, but you know, that meant especially his close godbrothers who were primarily sannyasis and gurus, you know. He said, amongst my friends, he said, this is what he said. He said, the goal of life is that we achieve Krishna prema. And in order to do that, before we die, we need to completely let go of lust. Right? We need to become free of lust. And he said, and amongst my friends, he said, Borijan Prabhu is the one that's the most free of lust.
Wow.
Who's a grihasta.
Wow.
Right? Yeah. And he said he went deeper into it, just saying it's not that he was saying that he or any of his friends misbehaved or anything.
Right.
But he said the one that really had the detachment, like the deepest and truest detachment, the most complete detachment, he identified the grihasta amongst his close friends.
Wow.
As one had that. So my point being is that these are different strategies, you know, to achieve the goal. And just because you choose, like, say, the more renounced strategy, it doesn't mean that you're actually more renounced. So I didn't understand that as well then as I understand now. That everything's more complex, a little bit more complex than I might have originally seen it. Right. And but this is the point, is that we're able to completely open our minds and our hearts to Krishna when our affection for him is exclusive. Right? That's what it means that we're advancing, right? That my time and my energy and my efforts and my affection is exclusively yours. That's prema, that's love. And to the degree that we think, and all my happiness lies in my understanding that. And I am completely fulfilled in that surrender. I don't need anything else. Right? I don't need anything else. So that's our goal, to come to that state of consciousness, that there's nothing that I need, whether it be financially, sexually, commonly people have an idea like my happiness comes. This is why we find all these heavy statements in Bhagavatam, because in a more pious culture, people's, in our culture, we think, right, I need lots of girls to be happy and I need lots of money to be happy. These are the messages that are put out there. In a more pious culture, it's like family, right? It's like that my wife and my children, or my husband and my children, and that this family is the source of my happiness. That Bhagavatam is telling us that that's illusion too, right? And Bhagavatam from time to time will attack that conception, that no, please understand that true happiness isn't found through anything external. And so therefore, our Krishna conscious, Bhagavatam informed idea of Grihastha life is it's two people working towards one goal, right? It's not like I'm looking to you to fulfill me.
Which is an unfair thing to ask someone.
Well, it's doomed, right?
Right.
It's doomed. At the very least, it's doomed by time. But it's likely that when two people are trying to find their happiness from the other person, that there's going to be disappointment and there's going to be conflict, because as soon as they're at a certain point, as soon as they're, I need you to do this for me to be happy. Yeah, but that's not going to work because I need you to do this for me to be happy. And then there's conflict. But if the two, and actually, I did ask Gita Priya, is there anything that I should share that you would like me to share on this topic? So this is the point that she shared, that what it means is it's two people. They're not looking for fulfillment from one another. You complete me, right? Like that thing, right? Or you're my soulmate, like that. I mean, I'm not saying that anybody that's used that term is wrong or anything like that, but what I'm saying is there is the quote unquote romantic idea that when I'm with that perfect person, that I'm going to be completely fulfilled, and that's going to be fulfilled through physical intimacy and as well as emotional intimacy, and then I'll have true happiness. We're meant to understand that no, there is happiness and there is true love. I believe, like there's a true, genuine, sincere affection that I feel for my wife. That is really, honestly, I don't know. I can't imagine marriage without that. Like, I want to provide for my wife, and I want to protect my wife, and I want to be with my wife, and I want her to be happy because I actually love her, because I really care about her and I really appreciate her, and so that's there, but it's not from her that I need to derive my happiness in life, and including sexually, right? Including sexually. So what the Grihastha ashram does is it does kind of like give you the opportunity to learn that, to realize that, like that in your youth, you're meant to hear all this philosophy, but what do you know about it? What you're right, because you're
Right.
hearing about Grihastha life, and you're hearing about death, and you're hearing about all these things, but you're so young, you haven't experienced anything yet. And then you go into married life, and here's the opportunity to mingle with the world, to get worldly, right? And again, specifically making money and the opportunities that opens up for you that you didn't have as a child, as a youth. What to speak of, Guru Kula, serving a guru, going out, bringing the wood, following the order of the guru, right? Then you're like living a life that's and I did live a brahmachari life like that, where you're following the order of the guru, and that's you're so protected in that, in a sense, right? Like from veering off into something potentially distracting to your spiritual progress. But then when you enter Grihastha ashram, it's like doors open up, right? Now you've got your own money. Oh, I'm going to buy a television set. Oh, I'm going to buy a car. Oh, I'm going to, I can start to buy things that distract me. And then there's sex. There's the physical, pleasure of sex, as well as the other great pleasure that comes out, which is having children, right? The love and the affection that one feels, one's feelings, one's heart is just flooded with this affection for this beautiful little boy, beautiful little girl, and the joy that one experiences through having children. You talk to parents about it, and there's nothing like it, right? There's absolutely nothing like it. A mother's holding that little baby, and just God, her heart is just completely melting. So Bhagavatam's not saying that's evil. Right?
Just to make it clear.
Yeah. But what it's saying is, but to achieve Krishna prema, we have to understand that it's not from that child. That if our bliss is attached to that relationship, well, with time, you're going to recognize more about that, because you're not only going to experience the bliss of having the child, but you're going to experience the constant anxiety of having the child. and you might experience disappointment in having the child. Right? And Bhagavatam, you know, one of the most, I think, instructive, I mean, all Bhagavatam is instructive, but one thing that really blows my mind is the experience of Lord Brahma, first being in the universe, most intelligent being in the universe, right? And like, he has children, and they totally disappoint him right off the bat. Right? He has the 4 Kumaras, and he's like, okay, this is great. I got these super qualified young boys coming up, you know, and they're going to carry out my desire, my holy, you know, sacred desire, the order of my Lord, you know, to populate this universe. I need to accomplish this duty, you know, of the Lord, and these sons of mine are going to help me achieve that. And they say, sorry, Dad, we're not going to do that. And he feels anger, right? He immediately feels anger.
Right.
And then Lord Shiva is born. And if you follow that, I mean, he experiences disappointment. He experienced humiliation, right? It's not far down the road that he totally humiliates himself. All of the problematic things that we go through in the universe, Lord Brahma goes through them right, you know, I say right off the bat, it was like a long stretch of time, but in a sense, you know, like you see, it happens with that original person in the universe. You know, it happens with Lord Brahma. So the point being is we get to see Lord Brahma go through it. We get to hear other instructions from Bhagavatam. We heard them when we were trained up as brahmacharis, you know, or in our youth. And then we enter into the grihastashram. We have children. You know, we have the physical intimacy. We have children. We have money. We have our house, a home. We can design it any way that we want, and and we've got space and freedom to do what we want to do with we have material enjoyment. But along with that, again, like with the bliss of having children, there's a disappointment. There's the fear, constant anxiety. Are they going to be sick? Are they going to get lost? Is someone going to harm them? You know, even sometimes there's tragedy, you know, and that a husband and wife, if they've regulated themselves, if they sincerely made the level of renunciation that's called upon in the ashram, that we're not going to have sex outside of marriage, then, you know, they can enjoy that part of their life. But the fact is, the way the mind works, the way the material energy works, is the thrill wears away. You know, the thrill of that wears away. That's the problem with our Western cultures. They try to remedy that by finding the next person so that you can regain the thrill.
Right.
But if you've been trained in your youth and you're in a supportive community, you get it. The thrill is supposed to go away, right? That's the whole point, is that with time and with the philosophy and with the examples in your community, you're supposed to be able to say, oh, this is actually good. You know, we had our physical intimacy, and it was beautiful, and it was wonderful, and it was fine. But we've also gone through look what we've gone through. A husband and wife, you know, after they've been married for 20 years, they can sit down with each other and say, and they know, because they've gone through together, the pain, the struggle, you know, the fear that they've gone through also has kind of like wringed out that enjoying spirit, you know, to some degree, has helped them understand, you know, all along, you know, it's this spiritual side of life that is really where the truest, deepest, most meaningful sense of contentment and happiness comes from. And isn't this wonderful that as we're getting older, we're letting go? You know, we're letting go of the idea that my happiness comes from my children, the idea of happiness comes through sex. And, you know, the poor people of the Western world that are desperately trying to keep their sex lives going as they grow older and making fools of themselves, right? Whereas like in this culture, it's like, no, you just let it go. Because there's something's rising, right? This is called a rise, right? There's something rising. And that is like the husband and wife, you know, in this traditional form where, you know, you're living in an extended family, say, right? And you had children, you got married when you're young, you had children when you're young. So by the time you're 40 years old, your children are mostly grown up. You know, you have children that are now 20 years old, you know, and you know, the other ones are not far behind. And so you're saying, oh, isn't this nice? Is that like, we don't have to have sex anymore. And we can feel good about that. We don't even need that to be happy, because we love getting up early in the morning, because we don't have to work anymore. because our children are supporting us now, just as we supported our parents. Financially, our children are supporting us. So then you go into what's called vanaprastha, for real, right? It means no more sex, no more making money. We're retired, and all our energy is focused on spiritual life. Isn't this perfect, right? It's like we're not struggling hard to try to still make money as we grow old. There's a whole system of support here for us, and we have all the time in the world, 24 hours a day. We can dedicate to spiritual life. We can go on pilgrimage together. We can, wake up early, and ideally, and chant our rounds, and read our Shastra, and rather than going out and playing golf or doing some ridiculous thing, people understand what this time is meant for, and now they're going into it without any of the material desires. They've been through it. They've let go of it. That's why I use that example when my guru said about Burijan Prabhu. It's like, he had a beautiful wife. He had beautiful children, but at a certain point, because he had gone through all of that, he was the most attached. And because he had that community, and because he had that wisdom all along, that he was cultivating throughout the whole thing. So then you're 50 years old, and you've let go of all the illusion and all the romanticism, the false romanticism of material life, and you've got hopefully a good 25, 30 years left where you're just fully practicing, intensely, your Shravanam and your Kirtanam. To me, that makes sense. Like it's a really powerful formula. It really works. Now we have all kind of complications because generally we don't have children that early in our life, and we don't have the that larger family, extended family to make all this work more. But and then that goes back to my original point. So we have to find some way to try to see how that principle can be like applied in this day and age. But my understanding is that if going back to the point that I was making about like how I see things differently now, to me, I can see someone on that path as, even if they're a little bit apparently, like lost in that material enjoyment as grihasta, right? That the experiences that life is going to put them through to come out the other side will become dynamic in their transformation. And and quite frankly, brahmacharya can be a way of trying to avoid that, trying to avoid responsibility, and thinking that one can sidestep the challenges in life that are going to transform us. I'm not saying that that's what brahmacharya. I respect someone if they're living a honest, genuine brahmacharya life of brahmacharya. But if we need those kind of experiences to transform, we're probably going to get them one way or another.
Right.
And therefore, you can see amongst brahmacharis pain, anger, frustration, similar kind of things that a grihasta might go through. But yeah, so I guess the original question was about my own marriage and so on. But I think just from our backgrounds, we were kind of cool with it. It was just like, it was
saying it plainly.
Yeah, I think for a lot of people, it might seem like if there's no sexuality within that relationship, again, for like the Western minds be like, are you crazy? What's going on here? But there's a lot within marriage that's important to us. That is not important. We do have physical intimacy, and we do have but most importantly it's that point that we're supporting one another.
Well, you sold it very well.
Okay.
I only have really two more questions. I don't want to take too much more of your time, but I couldn't avatar enough what you have, but just because of this sort of in-depth discussion on this last question, just one thing that I've observed vicariously, obviously, because I'm not in a relationship, is people having a hard time discovering if their values really do line up.
Yeah.
So in your particular case, your values, yours and Gita Priya's values lined up. And so it really, like everything I'm hearing from you just sounds very beautiful because there's that alignment. Whereas I've seen it, I've been around almost 20 years and I've seen it plenty of times over, that misalignment there. And it just is very disastrous. But a lot of the times what happens is that there is a belief that there's an alignment in values. And then you enter inside the relationship and then only you discover actually there's a very profound level of misalignment there that ends up breaking the relationship. And we want to do an episode about this. Divorce in our ISKCON family, at least, is very high. And we're trying to get some guests on to explore that particular topic. But anyway, probably one problem is a strong misalignment of values. So how would you advise a younger devotee or some devotees trying to enter into marriage? What needs to be done to discover if values are really is aligning enough? Like, I don't say it has to be like 100%, but it has to be enough that it's not going to break the relationship. How does one really go about discovering that? Like, what sort of advice you would give, maybe from your own personal experience?
Maybe I could. I'm sorry. Please go ahead.
Sorry, Prabhu. I just at this juncture also, just to amplify, just want to highlight Kelly's comment from
that's
earlier.
actually how I thought of this question also in this part.
I was looking over Kaylee's thing. I couldn't read it all because it was too much, and I was trying to concentrate the scenes, but it looked like some kind of lyrics that he was coming out with here. Some kind of poem that he was writing here.
Thank you. This is actually the comment that's making me ask this question at this juncture of the conversation.
Yes. Psychology, social status, compatibility, physical attraction, values, material desires, spiritual advancement, location, community. It seems like there is an overwhelming amount to consider before entering into a relationship. It seems like arrangement simplifies things. So yeah, Prabhu, I think the essence of it is basically just like choosing a partner 108, you know, like what can you tell us younglings that are still single?
I'm just gonna maybe not frame it as if it's my advice to a person, but maybe just share like what helped me or what might be helpful.
Sure.
First of all, there's the point that attachment clouds our objectivity, right? It's like when we have an attachment, it has a strong potential to allow us to convince ourselves of things that aren't true, or to not see things that are obvious to others. You know, it's a powerful principle in life, and that's why yogis cultivate, you know, vairagya, so that they can perceive truth. You know, my situation, I had a lot of support because I was kind of raised as a brahmachari in a community of some real serious renunciates that were really dedicated, who I had serious emotional ties to, who I had healthy emotional ties to, like who I saw as respectable kind of mentors, who are people that I would be embarrassed in front of if I didn't make a wise decision at this point in my life, who I couldn't picture myself appearing 5 years down the road in front of them, having thrown away, you know, to one degree or another, the service, you know, of Guru and Guranga, you know, like all of that was really strong. That was much more firmly, you know, situated in my mind in terms of decision making than some quote unquote romantic idea. So that was that. So that would, in my mind, that was very protective. Like that was really there to help me, prevent me from acting out of ignorance, you know, or and when I say that, I mean like acting based on material desire rather than dharma or, you know, clarity, right? I think probably more than anything, it was that kind of support that help me be able to see what are the qualities in this person that I'm looking for, and not like go off track, right? And I don't know, if the list that I was looking at was as long as Kaylee's. I think it was more summarized in my mind. That I needed someone whose goal in life was exclusively devotional service, and someone that was able to live simply, happy to live simply. And then, beyond that, I was looking for someone that I thought would be a good mother, someone that I thought, kind of embodied a kind of motherly affection, because I anticipated having children and I would want my children to have a very good mother. So, I was also looking for that kind of motherly, kind of caring character in a wife. And then beyond that, just someone that, in one sense, my wife and I are very different people, very different backgrounds. It's my world that I grew up in, she's got no interest in and no attraction to, or no, it's like punk rock, New York, all that stuff is like, and her life, was very foreign to me. So that was very different. But at the same time, I felt like, just on a personal level, I was happy to be with her. We could laugh about the same things and look at, I guess we kind of had a certain kind of like-mindedness about us. And to me, that was kind of a big enough checklist right there. She's cool. I'm happy with her. It's like we can hang out and I don't feel like it's a person that I can't relate to. I like this person. And they're dedicated and they're devoted. They can live a simple life. They're caring and they're motherly, okay. That was kind of, I'm not going to say that physical attraction had nothing to do with it. I wanted someone that I felt some physical attraction to. I'll be honest about that.
Right.
She's a beautiful girl, so, that was basically the length of my checklist, I think, more or less.
Nice. Hopefully that will be helpful.
But again, to me, the essential thing, like to get back to the original question, the essential thing was I had that ingrained in me. I had those people in my life.
Right.
Once Raghunath interviewed me on Wisdom of the Sages, and we were talking about my youth. And in my youth, I had a lot of my friends from when I was a kid. They ended up in prison. They ended up drug addicts. They ended up dead, due to whatever, a lot of my friends. And a lot of my friends were doing things that I never did even then. There are certain lines that they crossed that even though I was in that atmosphere and with those people, that I never crossed. And I said to him that even though at that time my relationship with my parents was very broken when I was a teenager, but I believe that the fact that that I grew up in a stable atmosphere, that my parents stayed married to one another, that my parents weren't like alcoholics or drug addicts, that my parents, they provided wasn't a luxurious upbringing or anything, and it wasn't like a dharmic upbringing, and in terms of what we understand from Shastra, but it was a stable environment, where my parents cared for each other and they cared for us and they provided for us. And I believe that background prevented me from crossing a lot of lines that I could have easily have crossed, and that many of my friends crossed. And then again, when it came time for myself making a choice about who I would marry, I believe that community, my guru and the other men that I respected in my life and who I wanted to follow in the footsteps of and who I wanted to be an important part of my life. And again, I would feel embarrassed come before them if I made a choice, made, solely, based on, sexual desire or whatever, it may be. How can I stand before them? How can I, I wouldn't feel, I've been embarrassed myself. So I think
that's very powerful to me. I mean,
it's a heavy type of.
Yeah, I wrote it down because it really hit me heavily to say that. And I want to do an episode on honor, because I feel like our generation has lost that sense of honor to previous generations. And I think that has a huge factor in our poor decision making in our life. Just as a sidebar, but I just wanted to say that point is really sticking out. I had to write it down because I was just like, yeah, do I have someone that I would feel embarrassed in front of if it were to come to the knowledge of a very poor, imprudent decision that I've made? And if I can't say yes to that, that seems like a major problem that's going to really impact my life's well-being. Yeah.
It's a very healthy type of social pressure.
Right.
But I believe social pressure can be unhealthy, but I see that as a healthy type of social pressure.
Right. Yeah. Well, I only have one last thing, because this question has to be asked, because marriage life ain't always sweet, and from what I've heard and from what I've actually personally seen, not only in my youth with my own mother and father, but also amongst devotees, I've seen them, Mortal Kombat style right in front of me. I'm like, hey guys, I'm still here. Maybe y'all want to wait until I leave before you do the KO thing. So how to navigate challenges in relationships? Like how? Now I can't even picture you and Kaustubha having challenges the way you guys' mentality seems from this episode, but this is obviously an important feature for relationships. Danya, in our last conscious relationship episode, as she said many wonderful things that she's accustomed to doing. But she's one thing that she said that really stuck out to me is that it's something to this effect: it takes compassion to fight fair. And she was giving a lot of different principles. She and Bali both were speaking very wonderfully on this particular topic. And so, we some insight on that, because a lot of young couples don't make it, which means that they weren't able to cross that threshold effectively of dealing with the pressure of, altercation and so on. So some of this and that.
Sure. I think that people go through these midlife crises because they feel at a certain point there was so much more that I was meant to enjoy, and it's not happening. This is my last chance. Right. And I think a lot of divorce has to do with that. But obviously there's a lack of love if one can do that. Right. There's a lack of I could never let this person down like that. So, ultimately love is that ingredient that kind of helps us get over those bumps. But one other thing I would share is that I think as a husband, you see, this again goes to that whole kind of like extended family thing. There's supposed to be people there that understand everything that you're going through because they went through it themselves. Right? And they're supposed to say, no, just give it a little time. You're going to cool down and you're going to get over this bump, right? Isn't it true? That, you know what? When I was your age, when we were your age, we went through the exact same thing. Just cool down. And I do think that is that you need to let the minds cool before you make any major decisions, lasting decisions. Like in a state of emotional vulnerability, one feels, oh no, this is overwhelming and there's got to be some kind of major change. And I don't want to make that change. Well, I need to make that change. And then I see people split, that kind of thing. But I think you have to give time for minds to cool, before you make any major life decisions. And hopefully if you do that, what seems like really big and all important one day, a couple months down the road may not seem the same. And you may realize, oh, okay, things aren't exactly what I thought they were. And we don't need to do exactly what I thought needed to be doing. So, but again, I think there's no substitute, for having those elders in your life and having those respected people in your life, having those wise people in your life. A husband and wife, they're in their 30s. And suddenly, the wife is like, oh, I'm unfulfilled and I need this or that, or the husband has treated her in a particular way that she's interpreting in a particular way. And then, she's going off to the women in the community, he's going off to the men in the community. Their parents, their aunts, their uncles, wise people, and they're saying, no, we get it. Hey, I went through. You got to go and express this to her right now. Or they're saying to her, hey, just calm down. You're going to get past this. It's like this can be worked out. We went through the same thing, and we did too, and we did too. While they're in it, they're thinking, this is the end of everything. Everything is, falling apart. Everything that I hoped for is gone now, and my life is, is completely lacking, and my heart is lacking. You get in these emotional states, and there just has to be people there to help you through those points that have gone through it, and that help you through it. So maybe the answer is, that's why I said I didn't really want to phrase these things necessarily as my advice that I give to a person.
Right.
Because if you don't have that, I don't really have any advice for you. Maybe,
Right.
But I think we have to kind of try to build the communities where people feel those relationships. If like I said, I had men in my life that I respected their opinions, I respected their examples, I wanted to be respectable to them, and who had good advice for me. And there's no substitution, I think, for that.
That's so powerful, Prabhu. I have just one more question. Is that okay, Prabhu? May
Yes.
I ask?
Sure.
And it's in relation to, you mentioned it twice, or you were referring to it twice. Firstly, when you were referring to that you had quite a few like really qualified, wonderful female friends who were really struggling to find husbands, and then you were also mentioning at a slightly later, you were saying that at that particular time when your brahmachari period came to an end, you started feeling ready to relate with women, also in like a manner of friendship, that you'd said. So basically, I just want to pick your brain around what advice can you give pertaining to that particular thing, like wholesome.
To him.
Excuse me?
What advice you can give to Krunavatar?
No.
Okay.
Pertains to more people than me. But yes, it does pertain to me very strongly. Like, just around navigating platonic, wholesome friendships with women, or someone also from women to men, in the opposite gender, because there's a lot of, from the traditional standpoint, it's like a constitutionally precarious thing, right? And but still, in our devotee society in the Western world, we're very much influenced by just, everyone kind of associates with everyone, and these friendships arise between men and women. So how to navigate that, and how to keep it pure, so to speak, like how to keep good boundaries, so on and so forth. I and I'll just say as a last point, Jai kind of really put picked me out there, but yeah, it's true. Like, my entire life, I've always had very positive experiences with feminine energy. My mother and I have an incredible relationship. I have amazing aunts. I have amazing female cousins. When I was in primary school, I was the first amongst our male boy peer group to befriend girls, and all the way, I've always had wonderful relationships with women that weren't necessarily romantic, and these days I get flack for it, but it's something that I don't really like. I can't really imagine not having those relationships. Anyway, maybe, I don't know if it's a selfish question. I do think that it is more universal. So what can you say, Prabhu?
Well, I don't know if my thoughts will hit exactly on what you're looking at, but they're just some thoughts in the realm of what you're bringing up. One thing is, marriage is meant to help protect that. In other words, to help protect us from crossing lines, right? Like, in other words, as a married man, any woman that I have a friendship with, it should be very clear in their mind through all my behavior and all my words, and they should understand this guy is devoted to his wife, and that ain't ever going to change, right? And I should never be behaving or speaking in a way that's going to give any other impression, right? And what to speak of if we're in a more traditional culture, it's like because there was no divorce, and there was, it would be even more like kind of like written in stone that don't even let your mind go there, because it's not going to happen. We live in a world where those lines aren't so well defined. So even more so, the care that we need to be like, if you are married, well then, in one sense, the problem, the problems that could arise are supposed to be off limits, but because that might not always be clear in our world, you got to make sure it's clear. I think so. As a husband, I feel it's important that publicly people can see, through my words and through my behavior, how devoted I am to my wife, how satisfied, how happy I am, and have no misconception about that. I think it's it's tricky. I mean, for an unmarried man, it's not as tricky, because you could, you might potentially marry one of these people, and you're going to get to know them, and we don't have our quaint little, I remember once I was visiting Madurai, and some devotees had arranged for a devotee family for me to stay with. And when I walked in there was like, in the living room, there was like kind of like a little, very innocent kind of teenage boy girl get together thing going on, where like there are 3 boys sitting on this one couch, and across from them there are 3 girls, and the family was, not far away. And it was just like, it was just, you could see there was some kind of very wholesome idea of how these people are going to get to know each other. And we don't have that in our worlds,
No, we do not.
And so I don't know what to say. It's all going back, really. I can only speak from my own experience. I was brought up in a way where I was determined I wasn't going to, I'm repeating myself now, but I wasn't going to find myself in a situation where those people who I admired would be disappointed in me, or even think less of me. I'll even say it that way, even think less of me. So to me, that was my protection, and there's not a lot of it out there.
I really appreciate that so much, because I didn't have always the best male influences in my life, but my mom was man and female for me. I mean, just the ways that she governed me. And it was very much that sense that the way that I interacted with women or men was in a way that my mom wouldn't think less of me. And it was like an absolute, like, I couldn't say, like, now it's occasionally like calling women the B word or this, that, and other. There was like no question of talk like that. I mean, for practical reasons, I might actually get my ass whooped. There was like that actual practical element to it. But it was also more important, was like, I didn't want her to be disappointed with me. Like that relationship, I held in such high esteem. And just to this point that you've repeated, but it's worth repeating over and over again, because it seems it's critical. I've been critical in my own character making, also having that elder with whom you have such a high regard and wanting to honor them with your proper decisions. So I'm just really appreciating it a lot. I'm getting a lot of that.
I'm appreciating it more as I speak about it too, like the role that these men played in my life. How grateful I am for it. I wish I could give a better answer. I don't know if I really have one. It does go back to, when men and women mix, and, fire melts, but it's all there, and it's all true. So
we definitely want to do a podcast on this, the man woman divide thing, because it's just that's going to be a juicy one. 2 guys, 2 girls, maybe 3 guys, 3 girls. It's a juicy one.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Kaustubha Prabhu. I think you've given us so much. Yeah, absolutely. Danya, thank you.
Thank you so much. Again, I appreciate so much the service you guys are doing, and honored to take part. Thank you for everybody that's been listening.
Yeah, it's been really nice. I just want to share this one because it's just beautiful. As a born devotee seeking to settle down with another devotee, hearing marital advice from such a great soul and it coming from a personal space is so enriching and insightful. Thank you for that comment. That's exactly why we wanted to do this as a continuous series, because we were thinking, a lot of devotees could probably benefit from this. In fact, I think Karuna Avatar's even gotten a message that some of our episodes has even helped save a marriage. Someone has written like this to us.
Awesome.
So that's why we do this.
Yeah, there's got to be conversation, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Jai. All right, everyone, please don't forget to check out Wisdom of the Sages in case you're unfamiliar. Kaustubha Prabhu, one of the illustrious co-hosts thereof. Also, if you have anything that you'd like to share with us, ariseheroicman@gmail.com or arise@ariseheroicman on Instagram. Also, please sign up for our newsletter, ariseman.net. And yes, that is our story for now. Jai, what are we unpacking next week, just in brief? With Rashanath Prabhu?
Yeah, we'll be having a special guest, Rashanath, and we want to talk about Enneagram and the various masks that we tend to identify with, which can inhibit or help us to flourish in our spiritual life. That's rough. He and I are going to have a meeting soon just to talk about exactly how we're going to do that. But it's going to be an interesting topic because we know about the mask and we know about the problems we'd be having with the mask. So how to make it a little bit useful to us.
Great.
All right. Hare Krishna.
Thank you.